In this video lesson, we'll discuss manifest destiny as how it relates to the areas of Texas and Oregon. During the uncertain 8 years since 1836, Texas had led a precarious existence. Mexico, refusing to recognize Texas's independence, regarded the Lone Star Republic as a province in revolt, to be reconquered in the future. Mexican officials loudly threatened war if America should annex the fledgling republic. The Texans were forced to maintain a costly military establishment. Vastly outnumbered by their Mexican foe, they could not tell when he would strike again. Mexico actually did make 2 half-hearted raids that, though ineffectual, foreshadowed more fearsome efforts. Confronted with these perils, Texas was driven to open negotiations with Britain and France in search of a country to protect them. In 1839 and 1840, the Texans concluded treaties with France, Holland, and Belgium. Britain was interested in an independent Texas, and such a republic would check the southward surge of the American colossus, whose bulging biceps posed a constant threat to nearby British possessions in the New World. Subsequent clashes would create a smokescreen diversion, behind which foreign powers could move into the Americas and challenge the insolent Monroe Doctrine. French schemers were likewise attracted by the hoary game of divide and conquer. These actions would result in the fragmentation and militarization of America. Dangers threatened from other foreign quarters. British abolitionists were busily intriguing for a foothold in Texas. If successful in freeing the few blacks there, they presumably would inflame the nearby slaves of the southern regions of America. In addition, British merchants regarded Texas as a potentially important free trade area, an offset to the tariff-walled United States. British manufacturers also perceived that those vast Texas plains constituted one of the great cotton-producing areas of the future. An independent Texas would relieve British looms of their chronic dependency on American fiber, a supply that might be cut off in time of crisis by embargo or war. Partly because of the fears aroused by British schemers concerning territories, Texas became a leading issue in the presidential campaign of 1844. The foes of expansion assailed annexation, while the southern hotheads cried Texas or disunion. The pro-expansion Democrats under James K. Polk finally triumphed over the Whigs under Henry Clay. President Tyler thereupon interpreted the narrow Democratic victory with dubious accuracy as a mandate to acquire Texas. Eager to crown his troubled administration with his prize, Tyler deserves the credit. Many Whigs feared that Texas in the Union would help the slave power, and unaware of their opposition, Tyler despaired of securing the needed 2/3 vote for a treaty in the Senate. He there arranged for annexation by a joint resolution. The solution required only a simple majority in both houses of Congress, and the resolution was passed early in 1845, and Texas was invited to become the 28th state of the United States of America. Mexico angrily charged that the Americans had despoiled it of Texas, but in 1845, the area was no longer Mexico's, and as the years passed, it was clear Mexico left the Texans dangling by denying their right to dispose themselves as they chose. By 1845, the Lone Star Republic had become a danger spot, inviting foreign intrigue that menaced the American people. The continued existence of Texas as an independent nation threatened to involve the United States in a series of wars, both in America and in Europe. What other power would have spurned the imperial domain of Texas? What the peculiar circumstances of the Texas Revolution, the United States can hardly be accused of unseemly haste in achieving annexation. It took them 9 long years to bring Texas into the Union as part of the United States. Now we turn our attention to the Oregon Territory. The Oregon Country was an enormous wilderness that sprawled magnificently west of the Rockies to the Pacific Ocean, and north of California to the line of the 5440 parallel. Part of this area was claimed at one time or another by Spain, Russia, Britain, and the United States. Two claimants dropped out of the scramble. Spain, though the first to raise its banner in Oregon, bartered away its claims to the United States in the Florida Treaty of 1819. Russia retreated to the line of 5440 by the treaties of 1824 and 1825 with America and Britain. These two remaining rivals now had the field to themselves. British claims to Oregon were strong, at least to that portion north of the Columbia River. They were based squarely on prior discovery and exploration, on treaty rights, and on actual occupation. The most important colonizing agency was the Hudson's Bay Company, which was trading profitably with the Indians of the Pacific Northwest for furs. Americans could also point to exploration and occupation. Captain Robert Gray, in 1792, had stumbled upon the majestic Columbia River, and the famed Lewis and Clark expedition of 1804 to 1806 had ranged overland through the Oregon Country to the Pacific Ocean. This shaky American toehold was ultimately strengthened by the presence of missionaries and other settlers, of whom reached the Willamette River Valley in the 1830s. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, who are seen here in this picture, are missionaries that are credited to be among the first to populate the Oregon Territory. The men and women of God, in saving the soul of the Native Americans, were instrumental in saving the soil of Oregon for the United States. They stimulated interest in a faraway domain that countless Americans had assumed would not be settled for centuries. Scattered American and British pioneers in Oregon continued to live peacefully side by side. At the time of negotiating the Treaty of 1818, the United States had sought to divide the vast domain at the 49th parallel. British, unwilling to give up the Columbia River, a scheme for peaceful joint occupation was thereupon adopted, pending future settlement. A handful of Americans in the Willamette Valley, when Oregon fever seized hundreds of restless pioneers in increasing numbers, their creaking covered wagons jolted over the 2,000-mile Oregon Trail as the human rivulet widened into a stream. The average rate of progress in covered wagons was 1 to 2 miles an hour, and this amounted to about 100 miles a week, or about 5 months for the entire journey. Thousands of humans, horses, and oxen died en route, and there is one estimate that for every mile there were 17 deaths of men, women, and children. By 1846, about 5,000 Americans had settled south of the Columbia River, some of them tough border ruffians, expert with bowie knives and revolving pistols, adopted and pending future settlement. The British, in the face of this rising humanity, could only muster 700 or so subjects north of the Columbia River. So they were losing in the population race, and they were beginning to see the wisdom of arriving at a peaceful settlement before being engulfed by their neighbors. Only a relatively small segment of the Oregon Country was in actual controversy by 1845. The area in dispute consisted of the rough quadrangle between the Columbia River on the south and east and the 49th parallel on the north and the Pacific Ocean on the west. So you can see the disputed area shown here on this map with the 49th parallel coming across here, the 5440 parallel here, and the 42nd parallel here. You can see that the United States was claiming land all the way up to the 5440 parallel, while the British were claiming all the way down to the 42nd parallel. Now, Britain had repeatedly offered the line at the Columbia River, and America had repeatedly offered the 49th parallel. So the issue now gets tossed into the presidential election of 1844, where it was largely overshadowed by the question of annexation of Texas. We'll talk more about the impact of the Oregon Territory the dispute between Britain and the United States, and the annexation of Texas into the United States in our lessons in class.